All right, so let's start this broadcast with the big story that's happening at this moment with respect to the Russia-Ukraine war, where Ukraine claims to have set up a military administrative office in Russia's western Kursk region, where its surprise incursion continues. Now, Ukraine has said that it has made further gains into the Russian territory with over 1,100 square kilometers of Russian territory now under its control. This amounts to 82 Russian settlements that have now been seized. Now, it says that it has got full control of a crucial city of Sudza, which is a Russian town 8 kilometers from the border. Now, remember, Ukraine, of course, is not doing it on its own. The West is, of course, playing a pivotal role. The United Kingdom has now joined the United States and Germany in allowing Ukraine to use its arms inside of Russia. This means anti-tank missiles, artillery armored vehicles and also other British-donated weapons can be used during the ongoing offensive. However, Russia is, of course, not ready to give up just yet. Reports now indicate that the country is urgently advertising for trench diggers to build its own defense lines. This, as it is upping its attacks against Ukraine. A video that's now been released by the Russian Defense Ministry shows the destruction of the HIMARS launcher in the Sumy region of Ukraine. The high-mobility rocket system was, of course, used in the Ukrainian attack on Kursk. And Moscow has said that it has recaptured a village in the region that was earlier seized by Kiev. Meanwhile, Russian strikes in 3 of the Ukrainian territories have resulted in the deaths of at least about 5 civilians. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what is happening at this moment between Russia and Ukraine, we're being joined by Dr. Malcolm Davis, who's a senior analyst in defense strategy and capability at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute from Canberra. He's joining us live on this broadcast and beyond. Dr. Davis, let me in fact start off by asking you this. Now, this was an offensive that no one expected, but now it's gone on for 11 long days, and we've not seen a credible Russian response to it. Why is that?
Well, I think it demonstrates the chaos and the disarray within Russia's military. You've got to realize that much of Russia's conventional ground forces have been deployed into Ukraine since the attack, the invasion that began in February of 2022. And the Russians have taken very heavy losses throughout the past years. So their forces have been essentially eroded down in terms of the number of forces and the quality of those forces. So basically, Russian military is in disarray and not in good shape.
But how much heart do you think Ukraine and its Western allies will, of course, take with what is happening at this moment in Kursk? Because the chatter is, at this moment, the Russian defenders who are defending in the Kursk region are said to be reservists with little military training. Once the actual Russian army, of course, steps in to defend Kursk, then the story will change pretty dramatically.
Well, the information coming out of various different groups watching this, including, for example, the Institute for the Study of War in the United States, is that the Russians are keeping their most effective forces inside eastern Ukraine because the Russians want to maintain their progress in eastern Ukraine. So they're throwing the reservists and the territorial army forces and basically the dregs, if you like, into the defense of Kursk, because they don't want to take the critical forces out of Ukraine and then see the Ukrainians reverse the tide there in Ukraine.
And also, this war is about the allies of Ukraine, the West. So far, the United States and its allies have been telling Ukraine that they can use the weapons for defensive purposes within the territory of Ukraine. But now what we are witnessing is something that has not happened in the last 2 years since this war has been ongoing, where Ukraine seems to have taken the war effectively into the Russian territory. Is this a direct confrontation now between Russia and the United States of America and its allies?
No, in the sense that what the US and its allies in NATO are doing is providing the tools, the means for Ukraine to fight back against Russian aggression. But the US and NATO are not directly firing on Russian forces. That's not happening. And I think that what has happened is that the British certainly have said you can use British supplied weapons against deep targets inside Russia. The Americans are still being more cautious in that regard. They're refusing to lift the constraints on that.
Right.
And that is tying the hands of the Ukrainians a bit. But it's certainly not, at this point in time, a direct military confrontation between NATO and Russia.
But just to probe that a little further, the fact that these weapons that are being used by Ukraine at this point of time are all supplied by the Americans and its allies, NATO nations, does it mean the logistical transport centers that are bringing in these weapons into Ukraine could now be hit by the Russians?
Not really, because if the Russians did that, if they hit targets inside NATO territory, then the Russians would be launching an attack on NATO, and that would be justification for NATO to enter the war directly. And I don't think the Russians want that, because they know that NATO could essentially destroy their forces in Ukraine with their conventional capabilities very quickly. So I don't think the Russians are going to hit those logistical centers inside NATO states.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Davis, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.